My name is Claire Donovan, and I am 29 years old. I drove down to our family's secure coastal compound in Vero Beach, expecting nothing more than salt air, bad coffee, and the usual low-grade tension that comes with any gathering that includes my mother. What I got instead was the kind of brutal truth that doesn't leave room for small talk or polite pretending. The trust fund my grandmother had set aside years ago sat at zero, every last dollar gone, and the people who drained it were already inside the compound gates smiling like nothing had changed. If you've ever walked into a room full of people who used to be your family and realized they've been treating your future like an open bank account, you know the particular flavor of silence that follows. Drop your thoughts below if you've lived something close to this. I'd like to hear it. The compound sits behind tall white walls, and a gate that requires a code only a handful of us were ever given. Palm trees line the drive, and the main house faces the water, with those big hurricane-proof windows that make everything look brighter than it actually is. I pulled up just after 10 on a Thursday morning in early June, windows down radio low. My older sister Meredith had texted the night before saying family weekend be here with that little smiley face she uses when she wants to sound warm without actually being warm. My mother had added a voice note about how we all need to talk like adults. I should have known right then. I parked next to my brother Brandon's truck and grabbed my overnight bag. The front door was already unlocked. Inside, the air conditioning hummed against the Florida humidity, and someone had left the sliding doors open to the patio. I could hear voices out there, my mother's clipped tone, my sister's lighter laugh that always sounded like it was covering something. I dropped my bag by the stairs and walked toward the kitchen instead of straight outside. That's when I saw the folder on the counter. Thick cream-colored, the kind my mother uses for anything she considers official family business. I opened it without thinking twice. Inside were statements from the trust account, page after page of transfers. Not small ones, not oops we needed a little extra for the roof amounts. Real money, the kind that adds up to an entire future someone else was supposed to have. My name was still listed as a beneficiary on the first page. By the third page it had been crossed out in my mother's neat handwriting and replaced with reallocated for family stability. I stood there staring at the numbers until they stopped making sense. Then I took out my phone and started screenshotting every page because something in my chest already knew I was going to need proof later. That was the moment the lies started unraveling in real time. Not slowly, not after weeks of hints. Right there at the kitchen island while my mother and sister laughed on the patio about some neighbor's new boat. I walked outside holding the folder. My mother looked up first. She was wearing one of those crisp white shirts she buys in bulk and a pair of sunglasses that hid most of her expression. My sister Meredith sat beside her in a sundress, legs-crossed phone in her hand like she was only half listening. My brother Brandon was at the far end of the table scrolling through something on his tablet, earbuds in. He gave me a small nod but didn't take the buds out. "Claire," my mother said like she was surprised I'd actually shown up even though she'd told me to come. "You're early." "I found the trust statements," I said. My voice came out flatter than I expected. "They're empty. Every account. I want to know where the money went." Meredith set her phone down slowly. She had that look she gets when she's deciding whether to play dumb or go on the offensive. "Those are private family documents, Claire. You shouldn't be going through things that don't concern you. They have my name on them," I said. Or they did until someone crossed it out, so yeah, they concern me. My mother took off her sunglasses and set them on the table with deliberate care. We made decisions that were best for everyone. The fund was never meant to be one person's private reserve. Your grandmother would have understood. I laughed once short and bitter. Understood that you and Meredith drained it dry while I was working 2 jobs to keep my apartment. Understood that you let me believe there was still something left for when I finally finished my degree or needed a safety net. That's what she would have understood. Brandon pulled one earbud out. He looked between the 3 of us like he was trying to decide whether this was worth getting involved in. He always did that hover at the edges until someone forced him to pick a side. My mother's tone shifted into the one she uses when she wants to sound reasonable while ending the conversation. "You've always been dramatic about money, Claire. We used what was necessary for the compound upkeep for Meredith's wedding last year for the investments your father and I made. It's not as if you were contributing to any of it." "I was never asked to contribute," I said. "I was told it was already handled, that I didn't need to worry." Meredith leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Because you make everything into a crisis. If we had told you we needed to adjust things, you would have made it about you, like you're doing right now." The words landed exactly where she wanted them to. I felt the old familiar heat rise in my chest, the one that comes from being called dramatic every time I notice something is actually wrong. I opened the folder again and slid one of the statements across the table so they could both see it. These transfers went to accounts I don't recognize, I said. One of them is in Meredith's name. Another one went through a shell that looks a lot like the family investment you tried to get me to sign papers for last winter. I didn't sign them. I guess that's why you had to find another way. My mother's face didn't change much, but her mouth tightened at the corners. That was her tell. She hated being caught with receipts. We don't have to do this in front of your brother, she said quietly. We can talk like adults later. I'd rather talk like adults now, I said, with the statements in front of us, and maybe with the screenshots I just took of every page in case anyone decides the originals are suddenly misplaced. Meredith's laugh was sharp. Screenshots. Of course you did. You always have to have your little evidence folder ready, don't you? God forbid anyone in this family makes a decision without your approval. I looked at her for a long second. You mean without me noticing I'm being robbed? The patio went quiet except for the sound of the waves hitting the seawall below the compound. My brother had gone very still. My mother picked up her sunglasses again and put them back on like the conversation was already over in her mind. You're upset, she said. That's understandable, but throwing around words like robbed isn't helpful. We're family. Families share resources. You'll understand when you're older and have responsibilities of your own. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. Not anger exactly, something quieter and more final. I had driven here thinking maybe we could still fix whatever was broken between us. Instead, I was standing on a patio in Vero Beach watching my mother and sister rewrite history in real time while the proof sat between us on the table. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't look at it. I already knew who it probably was, Tessa, my best friend, checking in because she knew how these weekends usually went. She'd been the one who helped me recover the deleted messages from the old family cloud account 2 weeks earlier. The ones where my mother and Meredith discussed moving money before Claire starts asking questions again. I hadn't shown those to anyone yet. I was still deciding whether I wanted to. Brandon finally took both earbuds out. Maybe we should all take a breath, he said. His voice was careful, neutral, the same tone he used when he was trying not to get pulled into the middle. My mother turned to him with a small, grateful smile. Thank you, Brandon. Your sister is just having a moment. I looked at my brother. He met my eyes for half a second, then looked down at the table. That was all I needed to see. I closed the folder and tucked it under my arm. I'm not having a moment, I said. I'm having the rest of my life without the money I was told would be there. And I'm done pretending that's normal. I turned and walked back into the house. Behind me, I heard my mother say something low to Meredith. I didn't catch the words, but I caught the tone. Dismissive, done with me. Upstairs in the guest room, I'd claimed I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my phone. The screenshots were still there, clear, time-stamped, irrefutable. I forwarded the whole set to my personal email and to the cloud folder I kept separate from anything my mother or sister could access. Then I opened the thread with Tessa. Me, they're already spinning it. My mother called me dramatic. Meredith accused me of making everything a crisis. Tessa replied almost immediately. Of course they did. You okay? I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. Me? Not really, but I'm not crazy. That's something. She sent a heart emoji, and then call me later if you need to vent, or if you decide to burn the whole compound down, I'm in for either. I smiled despite everything. Tessa had been my person since college, the one who never made me feel like noticing the truth was the same as causing problems. I put the phone face down on the nightstand and lay back on the bed staring at the ceiling fan. Downstairs I could still hear voices, but they were quieter now, probably strategizing. My mother was good at that, turning every confrontation into a narrative where she was the reasonable one, and I was the difficult daughter who couldn't let things go. Meredith had learned the same trick. Between the two of them, they could make almost anyone believe I was the problem. I thought about the deleted messages Tessa and I had pulled from the cloud, the ones where they discussed how much I didn't need, and how the money would be better used elsewhere. I thought about the way my mother had looked at the statements like they were an inconvenience instead of evidence. I thought about my brother's silence and the way he'd looked away. None of it felt like family anymore. It felt like a group of people who had decided I was easier to manage if I stayed small and grateful and quiet about the numbers that didn't add up. I sat up and opened my laptop. There was still one more thing I hadn't checked. The old shared drive where my grandmother used to keep scanned documents. I logged in with the password I wasn't supposed to know anymore and started searching. It didn't take long. Another folder buried under layers of family photos and vacation receipts. Inside were more statements, more transfers, and a single deleted message thread that had been moved to the trash but never permanently erased. The subject line was Simple Claire's portion, final adjustments. I clicked it open. The first message was from my mother to Meredith, dated 8 months earlier. We need to move the rest before she notices the quarterly statements. She's been asking too many questions about the degree program again. Tell her the fund is tied up in long-term investments if she pushes. She'll believe it if it comes from you. Meredith's reply had come 20 minutes later. Done. Transferred to the new account. She won't see it unless she goes digging, and she never goes digging deep enough. I read it twice, then a third time. The words didn't change. My hands were steady when I took the new screenshots. My breathing was even. But something inside me had shifted into a colder, clearer place. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't family sharing resources. This was deliberate, calculated. And they had been counting on me staying quiet and trusting for exactly as long as it took to finish emptying the account. I closed the laptop and stood up. Through the window I could see the patio below. My mother and Meredith were still sitting there. My brother had put his earbuds back in. None of them looked up. I picked up my phone again and opened the message thread with Tessa. Me, I found more. They planned it. They talked about it like I was an inconvenience they needed to manage. Tessa, Jesus. What are you gonna do? I looked at the folder still sitting on the dresser where I'd left it. Then I looked back out at the patio, where the three of them sat like nothing fundamental had just changed. Me, I'm going to stop letting them manage me. I didn't send it yet. I just stared at the words for a while, letting them settle. Then I hit send. Downstairs someone laughed. It sounded like my sister. I stayed in the guest room with the door closed and the screenshots backed up in 3 different places. The compound felt smaller than it had when I arrived. The walls that were supposed to keep the world out suddenly felt like they were keeping me in with people who had decided my future was negotiable. I didn't go back downstairs for lunch. I didn't answer when my mother texted asking if I was still sulking. I sat on the bed with my laptop open and started making a list. Not of what they had taken. I already knew the numbers. I made a list of what I still had. My name on the original documents, the screenshots, the deleted messages they thought they'd erased, the quiet, stubborn part of me that had never quite believed their version of events even when it would have been easier to. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough to start with. Outside, the waves kept hitting the seawall. Inside, the ceiling fan kept turning. And somewhere in the house, my mother and sister were probably already rewriting the story of what had just happened on the patio. I let them. I had the receipts. I stayed upstairs through the rest of the afternoon, the screenshots of the deleted messages still open on my laptop like evidence that refused to disappear no matter how many times I refreshed the screen. Downstairs, the compound carried on exactly as it always had, waves against the seawall, the low hum of the air conditioning, the occasional burst of laughter from the patio, but every sound now felt sharpened by what I knew. My mother and sister had not simply spent money they were never supposed to touch. They had planned the emptying of that trust fund the way some people plan vacations, with careful messages and quiet transfers, and the shared understanding that I would never look deep enough to catch them. By the time the sun started to drop behind the palm trees, my phone had already lit up twice, with messages from Tessa. She wanted to know if I was still breathing, and whether I had decided to burn the whole place down yet. I sent back a single line telling her I was still here and still collecting receipts. She replied with a string of fire emojis and a promise to be on standby if I needed an exit strategy or a lawyer. I appreciated the offer more than I let on. Tessa had always been the one person who never required me to shrink myself to keep the peace. I finally went downstairs when the smell of grilled fish and whatever my mother had decided counted as a family dinner started drifting through the house. The long table on the patio was already set with the good plates, the ones my grandmother used to insist on for special occasions. My mother sat at the head like she always did, sunglasses still on even though the light had softened. Meredith was beside her, scrolling on her phone with one hand while she sipped wine with the other. Brandon had claimed the far end again, earbuds in but one out this time, like he was trying to stay half present without actually committing. My mother looked up when I stepped outside. "There you are. We were starting to think you'd decided to skip dinner entirely." "I was busy," I said, pulling out the chair across from Meredith, collecting more evidence. Meredith didn't look up from her phone, but her mouth curved in that small, superior way she had perfected years ago. "Still on that God, Claire, you really know how to ruin a perfectly nice evening." I set my phone on the table face up so the folder of screenshots was visible. "Funny. I was thinking the same thing about the 8 months of messages where you and Mom discussed how to move the rest of the money before I noticed." My mother's fork paused halfway to her plate. She set it down slowly, the way she always did when she wanted to signal that the conversation had crossed some invisible line she alone had drawn. "We are not doing this at dinner. This is family time." Family time seems to be when you prefer to discuss how to keep me in the dark, I said. My voice stayed even, but the sarcasm sat right under the surface like oil on water. At least now I know why the quarterly statement stopped coming. You didn't want me asking inconvenient questions while you finished cleaning out the account. Brandon shifted in his seat. He still hadn't put the second earbud back, in which for him counted as full participation. Maybe we could talk about this later, when everyone's had a chance to calm down. Calm down, I repeated, tasting the words. That's what you say when someone finally notices they've been robbed. Calm down. Like noticing the theft is the actual problem instead of the theft itself. My mother picked up her wine glass and took a deliberate sip. You've always had a tendency to dramatize, Claire. The fund was a family resource. We used portions of it for things that benefited all of us, the upkeep here Meredith's wedding investments that were supposed to grow for everyone's future. You make it sound like we stole from you personally. You did steal from me personally, I said. My name was on the original paperwork. Grandmother left it that way on purpose. You crossed it out and moved the money anyway, then told me the statements were delayed because of administrative changes. That's not family sharing resources. That's lying to my face while emptying the account I was counting on. Meredith finally set her phone down. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low and reasonable in the exact same register our mother used when she wanted to sound like the adult in the room. You were never going to use that money responsibly anyway. You were talking about going back to school for another degree you'd probably never finish. Or moving across the country for some job that paid nothing. We protected the family from watching you waste it. The words landed with the casual cruelty she had always been good at delivering. I felt the old familiar burn behind my ribs, the one that came from being told my dreams were liabilities, and my caution was paranoia. I opened the screenshots on my phone and slid it across the table so both of them could see the message thread. We need to move the rest before she notices the quarterly statements, I read out loud. She's been asking too many questions about the degree program again. Tell her the fund is tied up in long-term investments if she pushes. She'll believe it if it comes from you. I looked up at my sister. That was you replying 20 minutes later. Done. Transferred to the new account. She won't see it unless she goes digging, and she never goes digging deep enough. The patio went quiet, except for the sound of the waves. My mother's expression didn't crack, but her hand tightened around the stem of her wine glass until the knuckles showed white. Meredith stared at the phone like the words might disappear if she glared hard enough. Brandon cleared his throat. Jesus. My mother recovered first. She pushed the phone back toward me with 2 fingers like it was something unpleasant she didn't want to touch for long. Those messages are out of context. We were discussing protecting the family assets from impulsive decisions. You have a history of making choices that cost everyone else money and time. I laughed once short and bitter. Right. Because finishing my degree or wanting a safety net is impulsive, but draining an entire trust fund behind my back is responsible financial planning. Meredith's voice turned sharper. You always do this. You turn everything into an attack on you. We made decisions that were best for the family as a whole. If you had been more involved, more present, maybe we would have included you. But you were always off doing your own thing, expecting the rest of us to carry the weight. The social circle at the compound had started to notice. Diana Holt, the neighbor from the house 2 compounds down, had wandered over earlier with a bottle of wine and an invitation to join them for sunset drinks. She stood now at the edge of the patio, holding her glass, clearly having heard enough to understand the temperature of the conversation. She gave my mother a sympathetic look. Families are complicated, Diana said, her voice light but pointed. My sister and I went through something similar with our parents' estate a few years ago. Sometimes you just have to accept that the older generation knows best and move on. Holding grudges only hurts yourself in the end. I felt the shift immediately. Diana had been friendly enough. The last few times I'd visited, polite nods, small talk about the weather, the occasional shared complaint about the gate code changing without notice. Now she was siding with my mother without even hearing the full story because my mother had already laid the groundwork. The narrative was already in motion. Difficult daughter, dramatic, ungrateful, making problems where there weren't any. My mother gave Diana a small, grateful smile. Thank you. Claire sometimes forgets that not everything is about her. I stood up. The chair scraped against the stone patio loud enough to make everyone look. I'm not forgetting anything. I'm finally seeing it clearly, and I'm done pretending that loyalty means staying quiet while you rewrite the rules and empty the accounts. I walked back inside without waiting for a response. Behind me I heard Meredith mutter something, and my mother's low reply, the same calm tone she used when she wanted everyone to believe she was the reasonable one. Diana's voice joined them, soft and supportive. The social circle was already closing ranks. Upstairs I called Tessa. She answered on the first ring. They're spinning it, I said without preamble. My mother called me dramatic again. My sister accused me of being irresponsible with money I was never allowed to touch, and the neighbor just showed up and told me to stop holding grudges because the older generation knows best. Tessa was quiet for a second. Classic. They're already rewriting history while you're still in the house. Are you okay? I'm furious, I said, and tired and done. I have the screenshots, I have the deleted messages, I have the crossed out paperwork, and none of it matters to them because they've decided I'm the problem for noticing. You're not the problem, Tessa said firmly. You're the one who finally stopped being convenient. That's why they're circling the wagons. Keep the evidence somewhere they can't touch it. And if you need somewhere to stay when you leave there, my couch is open. No questions asked. I thanked her and hung up. The house felt smaller with every passing minute. I could hear them still talking on the patio, voices low and reasonable the way people sound when they've already decided the outcome and are just managing the optics. My brother hadn't followed me upstairs. He hadn't said much at all after seeing the messages. That silence sat heavier than anything my mother or sister had thrown at me. I opened my laptop again and backed up everything one more time. Screenshots, message, threads, the original trust documents with my name still visible on the early pages. Then I started a new document, not a list of what they had taken. I already knew those numbers by heart. I started a list of what I still had control over. My own bank accounts, my job, the lease on my apartment that didn't depend on any family money, the quiet, stubborn refusal to keep swallowing their version of events just to keep the peace, and the growing certainty that blood had never been the same thing as loyalty in this house. Downstairs someone laughed again. It sounded like my sister. The sound carried up through the open windows and landed in the guest room like an accusation. I closed the laptop and stood at the window, watching the last of the light fade over the water. The compound that had once felt like a retreat now felt like a cage with very polite bars. My mother and sister had spent months planning how to take what was mine while smiling at family dinners. They had counted on me staying quiet, staying grateful, staying small. I was done being small. But I was also done staying in a house where the people who were supposed to have my back were the ones who had emptied the account and then called me dramatic for noticing the zero balance. The decision sat in my chest like a stone that had finally stopped rolling. I didn't need to scream it or make a scene. I just needed to stop pretending this was still family. I picked up my phone and opened the message thread with Tessa one more time. Me, I think I'm leaving in the morning. Can I crash at your place for a couple days while I figure out next steps? Her reply came fast. Doors open. Bring the evidence. We'll figure out the rest. I set the phone down and started packing my bag. Downstairs, the voices continued calm and reasonable and completely certain they were in the right. They had no idea I had already stopped playing their game. The receipts were still in my phone. The deleted messages were backed up in 3 places. And the quiet, bitter clarity I'd been carrying for years had finally hardened into something that felt a lot like resolve. They could keep rewriting the story. I was done being part of it. I woke before the sun the next morning, my bag already packed and sitting by the door of the guest room. The compound was quiet except for the steady sound of the waves and the low hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I had spent half the night staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every crossed out line on the trust documents, every deleted message they thought they had hidden. The receipts were still safe in my phone and backed up in 3 different places. That was the only thing that felt solid anymore. I carried my bag downstairs and set it by the front door. The patio doors were already open and I could see my mother sitting at the table alone, coffee in hand, staring out at the water like she was waiting for me. My sister appeared from the kitchen a moment later with a second mug. Brandon was nowhere in sight. For once I was almost grateful for his absence. I didn't want an audience for what came next. My mother looked up when I stepped outside. She didn't seem surprised to see the bag. You're leaving. I am, I said. I kept my voice even. The sarcasm that had carried me through the day before had burned down to something quieter and harder. I'm done pretending this is still a family I can trust. My sister set the mug down harder than necessary. Here we go again. Dramatic exit and all. You really can't let anything go, can you? I pulled out my phone and opened the folder one last time. I didn't slide it across the table this time. I just held it up so they could see the screen. I have everything. The transfers. The messages where you planned how to keep me from noticing. The original documents with my name crossed out in your handwriting. I'm not asking for the money back. I know it's gone. I'm just done letting you rewrite what happened. My mother took a slow sip of coffee. When she spoke, her voice was calm in the way that had always made me feel crazy for reacting. We did what we thought was necessary. The fund was draining faster than expected with the compound expenses and Meredith's wedding. You were never contributing. You were off chasing degrees and jobs that never paid enough. We protected the family assets. That's what families do. There it was, the partial truth she had been holding back. Not a full admission, but enough to show she knew exactly what they had done, and had already decided it was justified. She wasn't even pretending anymore that it had been an accident or a misunderstanding. She was telling me straight out that they had chosen to take what was mine because they believed I didn't deserve it and wouldn't fight back hard enough. My sister crossed her arms. You're making this into something it's not. We didn't steal from you. We reallocated resources that were sitting there doing nothing while you figured out your life. If you had been more reliable, more involved, maybe things would have been different. I laughed once, low and bitter. The sound felt foreign even to me. Reliable. You mean quiet, grateful, willing to keep swallowing whatever story you fed me so you could keep moving money without questions? That's what you wanted. Not a daughter or a sister. A convenient placeholder who wouldn't notice when the account hit zero. Diana Holt appeared at the edge of the patio again this time, with a small plate of pastries, like she had been invited over for breakfast. She took one look at my bag and my mother's face and immediately shifted into the same sympathetic tone she had used the night before. Claire Honey families fight. But walking away over money? That's permanent. Your mother and sister are trying to do what's best. Sometimes you have to trust the people who have been around longer. The social circle had finished closing. Diana didn't even need the full story. My mother had already seeded it the night before, and now the neighbor was repeating it back like gospel. I felt the last thread of connection to this place snap. These were no longer people who might eventually hear me. They were people who had already decided I was the problem and were comfortable saying it out loud. My mother set her coffee down. If you leave like this, don't expect us to keep explaining things to the rest of the family, or to keep any doors open. You're choosing this. I'm choosing not to be lied to and stolen from anymore, I said. That's the only choice I'm making. I turned to go back inside for my bag. That's when Brandon stepped out from the side of the house. He must have been walking the beach path. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept either. He stopped a few feet away and didn't come all the way onto the patio. I knew he said quietly. The words landed like a stone in still water. Not everything, but enough. Mom asked me to sign some papers last year that would have moved part of the fund into an account only she and Meredith could access. I told her I needed time to think about it. She said, if I didn't sign, she'd find another way and I should stay out of it if I wanted to keep the peace. I stayed out of it. He looked at me, then at our mother, then back at me. I'm sorry, Claire. I should have told you I didn't want to be in the middle. That was cowardice. I see that now. My mother's face tightened, but she didn't deny it. My sister looked away. The confession sat between all of us like something no one knew how to clean up. It didn't change what they had done. It didn't bring the money back. It didn't make the loneliness any smaller, but it was the one honest thing anyone had said since I arrived. I nodded once at my brother. Thank you for saying it out loud. It doesn't fix anything, but at least it's real. I picked up my bag and walked to my car without looking back. No one followed me. No one called my name. The gate code still worked when I punched it in. I drove out of the compound and didn't stop until I reached the highway, heading north toward Tessa's place. The drive was quiet. I kept the radio off. Every mile felt like another layer of something I'd been carrying for years finally falling away. Not relief exactly, something closer to clarity. The kind that doesn't come with celebration, just the steady knowledge that you finally stopped lying to yourself about who people are. Tessa was waiting when I pulled up. She didn't ask questions, she just took my bag and made coffee and sat with me on her couch while I showed her the full folder of screenshots and messages. When I was done, she said, you did the right thing, even if it feels like shit right now. It did feel like shit. The social circle I had once thought of as extended family had already started posting careful, neutral comments on the family group chat that made it clear whose side they were on. My mother had sent one text before I blocked her number. When you're ready to be reasonable, we can talk. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't just give her more material to twist. I spent the next few weeks doing the quiet work of separating my life from theirs. I changed the passwords on every account they had ever had access to. I told my own small circle of real friends what had happened, and watched some of them pull back because family drama is complicated. The ones who stayed Tessa and 2 others became the only people I trusted with the full story. Everyone else got the short version. I had walked away from a situation that was no longer safe for me. There were nights when the loneliness hit harder than I expected. I would sit on Tessa's couch, or later on the couch in my own apartment, and feel the weight of every Sunday dinner I would never attend again. Every forced holiday conversation, every time I had swallowed my own certainty to keep the peace. My mother and sister had taken the money and then taken the narrative. They had made sure that anyone who asked would hear their version first. The truth I carried didn't come with public vindication or restored relationships. It came with silence on the other end of the phone and an empty seat at tables I no longer wanted to sit at anyway. But the clarity stayed. Every time I opened my banking app and saw that my own accounts were still mine untouched by their decisions, I felt the same quiet defiance. Every time I blocked another number or deleted another message trying to guilt me back into the fold, the same sentence ran through my head. Blood does not mean loyalty. They had proven it. I had finally believed it. I started seeing Dr. Nathan Cole twice a month, not because I thought therapy would magically fix the hole where my family used to be, but because I wanted to make sure I didn't carry their version of me into whatever came next. He listened without trying to make it neat. One session I told him I felt like I had traded a broken family for complete isolation. He said, "Sometimes the cost of seeing clearly is that the people who needed you to stay blind don't want you around anymore. That doesn't make you wrong, it makes you free." Free! The words sat differently than I expected. Not triumphant, not even particularly happy, just true. I had the truth. I had my own money, my own apartment, my own small circle that didn't require me to lie. I had boundaries that no longer bent the second someone called me dramatic or difficult. And I had the knowledge that I would never again let anyone convince me that noticing theft was the same thing as causing problems. My mother never apologized. My sister never reached out except through one carefully worded message from a new number asking if I was really going to let money come between us. I deleted it without replying. Brandon texted once, months later, saying he was trying to figure out his own lines in the sand. I wished him well and didn't offer more. Some bridges you don't rebuild even when someone finally admits they helped burn them. The compound in Vero Beach still exists. The gate still requires a code. The trust fund is still empty. My mother and sister still tell their version of the story to anyone who will listen. The social circle that once included me has closed completely around them. I am not invited to holidays or group chats or sunset drinks on patios that used to feel like neutral ground. And I am okay with that. Some mornings I still wake up with the old anger sitting in my chest like it never left. Most days now it's quieter. I go to work. I meet Tessa for coffee. I pay my own bills with money no one can take from me without asking. I keep the screenshots in a folder I almost never open anymore, not because I've forgotten, but because I no longer need the proof to believe my own memory. The truth did set me free. It just didn't come with company or closure or any of the things people promise when they talk about speaking up. It came with an empty chair at every table I used to fight to keep, and the steady, defiant knowledge that I would rather sit alone than sit across from people who had already decided my future was theirs to spend. I chose myself. I set the boundary. I walked away, and I am still here. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, drop your thoughts below. What would you have done when the receipts finally showed up?